Well, all right, y'all. All across the USC, Compton, Watts, Bay to LA, Pomona, California, from valley to valley, we represent that killer Cali. So if you keeping it real on your side of your town, you tune in to Gangsta Chronicles. Ew.
Gangsta Chronicles, we gon' tell you how it goes.
If I lie, my nose will grow like Pinocchio. We gon' tell you the truth and nothing but the truth. Ew.
Gangsta Chronicles, this is not your average show.
You're now tuned into the real MC8, Big James, and Big Steel.
This is strictly from the streets.
Hello.
We represent the James. We represent the James.
We'd like to welcome everyone to this special episode of the Gangsta Chronicles, and I have a very special guest in here with us tonight, man. I had the pleasure of sitting down with music executive Ron Spaulding. Ron has worked in the music industry for almost 30 years. You know, at Priority Records, he worked with such notable acts as Jay-Z and Master P's No Limit Records. You know, over his lengthy career, Ron has had a hand in selling almost 30 billion records. That's a lot of money generated. How you doing tonight, Ron?
I'm doing great, Steele. Good to see you, my brother.
Nice seeing you too as well. You know, the first thing I got to start off with, man, you know, you got a real impressive resume. How did you wind up in the business? How did you wind up in urban music?
You know what? I'll tell you, Steele, and some people do know this story. I didn't pick music. Music picked me, and I kind of have lived my life like that. But I was working as an hourly employee in a store in St. Louis, Missouri. And I ended up in their executive training program. And when they promoted me up, it was a discount store called Venture Stores. I ended up becoming an assistant buyer at corporate, and it was in music. So that was the very, very early days of me getting a taste that there was something to do in music besides having a mic in your hand or a guitar in your hand.
So you just started off. So you started off at retail then?
I did. I started off in retail, and I'll tell you a funny story, Steele. I got out of college, and I thought I was going to own the world and be president of the world, right? Because, you know, I had a college education that was unusual in my family, so I'm all proud in that, and I ended up making $3.35 an hour right after college. So my dreams of owning and running the world were a little bit shattered at that point.
Yeah, a little bit shattered. So let's jump up. The first major job you have, I assume, is at Priority Records, right?
It is. I had been a buyer in music, and I had worked for an independent label before that for about a year. But my first real break in the business was at Priority Records. And I joined Priority Records in very early days in 1990, actually.
Oh, so 1990. So you were around when NWA first came in and all those guys then?
Yep. I had an opportunity to work with Eazy-E and Jerry Heller and you know, certainly with Cube and Ren and Yella and Dre back in those days. So as a very young sales executive at that time, that was my first taste. When I first got to Priority Records, I didn't have, you know, listen, I grew up without having, you know, a lot of exposure, certainly to black music and black culture. I had listened to some blues and some R&B and stuff like that, but I was really, you know, had not grown up around that space. And the first record that they sent me was a group that Eazy-E had signed by the name of Penthouse Players Clique. Now I'm taking you way back now.
And that's with DJ Quick and those guys.
That's exactly right. And I put that in my player and in my car, and I was driving down the street, and I rolled the windows up real quick. I was like, "Oh my God, you know, I can't believe what they're saying."
Mm-hmm. So that was your exposure, kind of like to rap music, the gangster rap.
That started me. That was the first record I touched in gangster rap and in West Coast gangster rap, to be more specific.
Okay, yeah. So tell me about that a little bit. How were your interactions back then with Eazy and those guys? Because, you know, you got to see them come in and kind of go through the whole thing that they were going through.
Yeah, you know, I was an ignorant young man, just like many people are, right? Because you don't have the experience to back it up. So I didn't really understand early, like, everything that was involved in the game and exactly where people were coming from. It took me a minute to get my head around after sitting with a lot of great artists, with with Jerry and Easy, and being in meetings with Cube, and being in meetings with the Rap-A-Lot folks and all that Southern hip hop, it took me a minute, Steele, to get my head around the fact that these were not just, at that time, it's changed a little bit, these were not just commercial initiatives, right, to make money and sell records and create some kind of hoopla. This was people talking about real life experiences. This was people expressing their frustration about police brutality, or expressing their frustration about segregation, or expressing their frustration about unequal treatment and those kind of things. And then I really got to understand people's walks and really where some of the lyrical content was coming from and what they were trying to say. And it became very, very, very important to me at that time. I was very impressed, saddened a lot of times, but very impressed about the differences of journeys between different cultures here in America, and what, motivated people to tell their story,
Mm-hmm. So at that time, man, and I will hope that lays true for today. You think kind of society made an impression upon music back then?
Oh, yeah. I think that, people typically, if it's authentic, right, and it's real and stuff that stands the test of time, like Straight Outta Compton and stuff like that, these were real stories about experiences that these young men were having in their neighborhoods and in their lives. And no one had really told it in a commercial way. I mean, everybody that lived in the community, had experienced certain things that, with the police and stuff that's really topical right now. But no one really had brought it into the mainstream. It was very, very hush hush, very behind the scenes, and really exposed a lot of interesting cultural journeys that particularly at that time Black America had been on, and even today that they're still on.
Yeah, exactly. So now let me ask you this. Did you ever have a lot of personal interaction with the guys in NWA?
I did have personal interaction, but it wasn't nearly as tight. I was always in the meetings. I had certainly sat with Eric. I had certainly done a lot of business with Jerry Heller, quite frankly, because he was, at Ruthless at that time. That was a big deal to us. And I then started, that was kind of NWA was really the beginning of where I started to get exposed to artists, start to get in front of them, start to try and, see them as something other than just, stars or, music artists, and start to really understand them as people. But it took time from there. I was, when you're at a label like that, and particularly Priority being an independent label, you kind of do a little bit of everything. You don't just do what you're appointed to do. So we were always in the room and such, and always in part of that. It grew over time.
Yeah, because we're going to touch on Priority a lot, because Priority has such a strong history. And I'd like to tell people that outside of Def Jam, they're probably one of the greatest hip hop labels ever.
I believe so. I mean, it's personal to me. We had a really tight family there, and it grew tremendously over time. But in the early days that I got there, it was really a tight family. And those persons, those executives and people that worked there, and a lot of the artists that are still with us, thank God, I'm really close friends with today, really close personal friends with, and have maintained a fantastic relationship over the years.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because you were around during that time, so you got to see a lot of people come and go. When that rift started happening with, NWA, when they decided to break up, did that impact everything going on in the building at the time? Did that cause a stir in the building?
Oh yeah, one of the things, yeah, absolutely, and a lot of those rifts are obviously well documented, right? But listen, we'll all. For the rest of time, and certainly during that time, it always becomes typically about money or image, right? Those are the two things that are important in the entertainment business. So if you disrespect somebody, or if you play with their money, or they think you're playing with your money, you don't even have to be playing with it. It causes people to get pretty emotional.
It causes people to get real emotional. Now, let me ask you this, Ron. You guys had somebody, and I think people often forget this in history. you guys have, which probably, he's probably considered one of the greatest moguls in music right now, Jay-Z. You guys actually had an opportunity to bring Jay-Z over there to Priority for to release his first album because everybody was telling him no. Do you remember any of the details surrounding that?
I do. Some of them I prefer to leave private, but Jay-Z and Damon Jay, and there was a gentleman there by the name of Al Branch. They were the early Rockefeller. Obviously, everybody knows Dame and Jay. But we put out the Reasonable Doubt record there. And, pardon me, Jay, for saying this, I still think it's your best record you ever did.
Oh, yeah. So you thought that was the best album he ever did. So when you first heard that, you were impressed with it?
Oh, yeah. I thought that record was just off the chain at that time. And, it went on. We did very well with it. I mean, times have certainly changed in the music business like it always does. But, our bar of success has changed over the year, whether it becomes streams or this or that. But, putting out records like that, anything that went gold or above for us was considered to be a success. And I still have plaques on my wall for Reasonable Doubt, and I'm proud of that one. That was a great record.
Oh, Reasonable Doubt wouldn't go back then?
It did.
That's a good thing. I think it's one of Jay-Z's greatest albums too. So you're not alone in that thought. I've heard people say that. So you guys, man, the thing I liked about Priority is that I think you guys, versus building just recording artists, you guys assisted a lot of moguls in building their brand. You guys created a lot of companies. Let me ask you this, one of the greatest success stories ever, one of the best salesmen ever, I think, in the history of rap music, Master P. Can you take us back to the beginning of how that all came with the whole No Limit thing? Yeah,
I will. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there now. And again, I stay in touch with a lot of that crew, of the No Limit crew. We spend an awful lot of time together. Me personally, I spent an awful lot of time with each one of them, whether it was Fiend or Mia or Servon or KLC and the Medicine Men and that whole crew. But it was really an interesting time because Priority had just come off of The Chronic, right? Which was, again, probably one of the most influential hip-hop albums in history. It really introduced, in my humble opinion, the G-Funk era and really commercialized hip-hop, right? I mean, that was one of the first records. It was certainly the first record I was ever involved with that got commercial radio play, right? That actually, we were a street label. We put stuff out with guerrilla marketing and street marketing. We used the clubs and the DJs, and there wasn't exposure on video on major network channels. BET, and radio was never going to play our music, right, or the music of the artist that we so chose. But Master, we had just come. I mean, Chronic was still blazing. I mean, it's still doing great today, right? And we had found success in that. And I had a sales at Priority. I worked for a man by the name of Bob Grossi there, and I was doing mainly sales, and we were doing a little bit of everything. But there was a gentleman there by the name of David Weiner that worked for me at that time. He was a West Coast sales rep, and David's been on quite a bit of TV. He's a good friend of mine. He's a great man. And he really discovered, and brought Master P to Priority. And being David's boss at that time, David and I were, working to try and figure out what we had here. I'll never forget, I was riding in a car before we signed Master P, and, we put out the TRU record, which again, I think is one of the best records he ever did. That first TRU record was a hard record, but David, had brought him in, and I was sitting with P, and we had not signed him yet. We were down in San Diego, and Master P and I went to Tijuana to go to the clubs down there that night. And I remember him saying on the ride down to Mexico, he was like, "I'm going to be bigger than Dr. Dre," right? And Dr. Dre was huge at that time. The Chronic was gigantic, still is. And I was like, man, if I could tell you how many times I've heard somebody say that to me, right? I hope you are, but that's a tall order, right? Being bigger than Dr. Dre, right?
Exactly.
So just to further it, Steele, not to to suck all the air out of the room. But one of the things that continued to happen is P would make these prophecies, right? He would say, I'm going to be bigger than Dr. Dre. I mean, he did $218 million in 18 months in volume by putting out records with the tank on them, right? From all the artists that we're so familiar with now, right? That was in that crew. And, he came to us one day and he called me, said, I'm going to put out, he actually didn't tell us. He just shipped a load of dolls, Master P dolls, to the warehouse in Jacksonville at that time, which we were distributing our records. We weren't in the toy business, right? So I'm arguing with the guy about the dolls. Before I could get done with the argument, right, we put together a sell sheet and we put it out to our retail partners, and it sold out and they were gone. He said, I'm going to make a movie. It's called I'm About It, right? And I watched the movie, and, hey, I'll be the first one to tell you, and people that tell you differently may or may not be telling the truth. I didn't get it. I watched it. I was like, okay, I was like, that's a pretty low budget movie. You know what I mean? Not a big deal. And the thing just blew out. I think it went 4 times platinum at that time. And then everything we sold on that thing went one way, which was unheard of at the retail industry at that time. We sold it all one way because, P was like, hey, nobody believed in me. Nobody believed in the movie. So they can buy it one way and own it if they want to have it on their shelf. So he really changed a lot of the marketing and a lot of the, ideas. And he was still is. I mean, he's still a great man. He was a real force to be reckoned with as it relates to marketing and concepts, and then making them come to a reality. I mean, there's a guy that said, hey, I'm going to go play basketball in the NBA, right? And he did.
He did.
So
one thing you can't front on that guy, and I still say that he probably has to be one of the top 5 executives in black music, and I put that up there with Barry Gordy, Russell Simmons. You have to mention P right along with Eazy-E and those guys, because I think with P it's even more profound because he wasn't exactly the best rapper in the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can never judge a man's heart, and man, that guy wanted it more than anybody I ever met, and he went and got it, and I'm proud of him. And hey, he changed the game, and he will forever be cemented in all of our history books as a rap icon, one of a kind. Big props out to P. No joke, he's the truth all the way through and through.
Yeah, he is, and I think one of the things with No Limit, I think, like you said, I think he was always kind of a step ahead of the curve with everything.
Great marketing guy, fantastic on execution. Mm-hmm. And again, I almost thought he was a prophet, right? He would say something and then sure enough, it would always come true. And I was like, my gosh, I can't argue with this man anymore because whatever he says, whether I think he's right or wrong, doesn't matter.
Well, one way you got to look at it too, he had a kind of like a guy that was a predecessor for gangster rap in the South. I don't never discount Uncle Luke for what they were doing down there, but that was a different kind of music. I think Jay Prince brought the gangsterism from the South, that gangster element, because when you listen to those Rap-A-Lot CDs and you heard him talk at the beginning of them, it almost like he was giving you a message about what was going on in Houston at the time. And I look forward to those as a kid growing up in the Midwest. I used to love Rap-A-Lot records. So Priority was Rap-A-Lot Records' first major distributor, weren't they? We distributed records for Jay. Jay's become a good friend over the years. I know that you all have a relationship as well, and he's been on the show, right? Yeah, he's been on the show. Jay is a great dude, man. That's my buddy right there.
So, you got to give early pioneer credit to Jay Prince, especially when it comes to Southern hip hop, right? Mm-hmm. Because we all have our geography, right? We got West Coast had a little bit of a different feel and sound and a little bit of different culture, quite frankly, the things that people were into, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had the East Coast, which certainly had a different feel and sound and is credited with being the initial early, introducing rap, right? And they had a different feel and sound. And then in the South, Rap-A-Lot Records certainly define that Southern feel and sound. And as far as I'm concerned, there will always be the original down there. Signed some fantastic artists. Again, people that have become friends of mine over the years, and much mad love, mad respect for. I consider Rap-A-Lot to be my family. Those people in the office down there, and Jay Prince and the people that he had around him. Jay is a one-of-a-kind, straight-up great music executive, and I love him to death. He did a fantastic job, continues to. And there's another man, whatever he touches, whatever he gets involved in, whatever he wants to see come true, he goes and makes it happen. And gosh, that's a beautiful thing, ain't it?
Yes, it is, because the thing about Jay Prince, too, is that the thing I always loved about Jay is Jay don't do a whole bunch of tongue wrestling or lip wrestling. He kind of just give you that courtesy call, as he likes to say it, and that's what it is, you know what I mean? And he's calm. I've never heard him raise his voice. It's always like, well, hey, this is what we want to do now right here, and this is what's going to happen. You go do this, and I'm going to do that, and we go going about our way. And there was never no bunch of lip wrestling. Nothing. Jay is just no nonsense.
Yep, he's a quiet man. I've had full-on meetings with my staff with him, because Jay and I have been in several different, distribution relationships. We were at Priority. We were at Warner with Asylum East West. I had Jay there. And then I had Jay again at Fontana when I was at Fontana. And I had whole meetings with my staff, and Jay didn't come to all of them. But when he was there, I've had meetings where he didn't say a single word during the entire meeting. People like, is he cool with what we're talking about? Is he cool with what we're planning? Is, this on this record release, is he in agreement? I said, if he's not in agreement, he'll let you know.
Yeah, he'll let you know. He'll let you know bad.
Jay, quiet man.
Jay is one. Now, let me ask you this. You've been around some pretty good executives. And you can answer this if you want to, because I know you go keep it 100. Have you ever had someone that was just an asshole that you just didn't like dealing with, but they were successful and you kind of tolerated them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have a whole notebook full of those people, right? I mean, life tends to throw us a lot of different kind of people. And I'm sure there are people that have me in that same notebook on their desk too. Not everybody's built for everybody else, and, Seal, I'll tell you, I've been around a lot of people that I didn't want to do business with, that I didn't really personally like, but I needed to do business with them because I respected them. And if I lost respect or they lost respect for me, that's the beginning of a very broken relationship. Yeah. And, without that, you can try at least my experience is you can try as hard as you want, but you just can't get there. And I've worked for people who just didn't respect me and didn't respect what I brought to the table, and that's okay. And I've had people work for me that I didn't respect and didn't respect what they brought to the table, and that's just a bad relationship. You need to cut that off sooner than later.
Yeah, and I'm really good friends with one of you guys' biggest acts over there. You may know him as Mac 10.
Yeah.
Me and him became, pretty good friends over the years. And the thing I liked about Mac is he always talks about priority with like that priority records with that regard and that nostalgia, like man, it was the best time ever. Like it was a family. I would go in and just like, he tells me about the time he walked in and he started hoop banging, and you guys just fully supported him with it.
Yep, Mac's a friend of mine as well, as you know. And, honestly, one of the things about priority was funny. I see this happen in corporate America all the time. It's gotten a little bit better because, we've matured corporately and music's matured and hip hop's now it's not a fad. It's not a music of a culture. It's not anything like that. It is the largest, most popular genre in the world right now. And so with that said, the thing that was magical about Priority is that it was a community of people with really a common goal, great leadership, and more importantly, we understood and we lived the culture. we still live in a world where we call people black and white, and we refer to them about their ethnicity. I think that's played out, and I hope that during my lifetime we won't. We'll refer to people as men and women or whatever they are, right, instead of referring to them by ethnicity. But we're still there. So if we're still there, I'll do the same thing. We understood black culture, and we didn't understand it because we thought we wanted to be in it, or we understood it because we lived it every day. I went to the neighborhoods. I was in, people's houses. I was at their parties. I was there for their holidays, and as much as we are the same, there are different cultural differences no matter where you're at, in the north, the south, the east, the west, like we just talked about.
Exactly.
Different language, different way of speaking sometimes, different customs, lots of different things. We were in the middle of it. It was what we did for a living, and we did it together, and we did have a family atmosphere and a loyalty and a real camaraderie inside that building that was really magical. I'll leave you with this as it relates. One of the things that happened when Priority was purchased by EMI, and once EMI purchased it, I resigned and I went to Warner and worked for Sylvia Rohn. Sylvia was kind enough to give me a shot to come to Warner and go to what we called the majors at the time, because I'd been an independent my whole life. That was a big step. And, when they bought it, I knew that they weren't going to maintain the culture of the company. Whether they intended to or not, I knew that was going to go away. And so I cut ties and left immediately. I was one of the first to leave because I just knew it was never be the same. We were now owned by a corporation. We weren't owned by Mark Cerami and Brian Turner, who founded the company. They were still there, but they weren't going to be the boss long term. EMI was. They paid the money. They wrote the check. Huh?
They cashed out. Now before we go on, because I know you have a long and storied career. Before we go on, I want to ask you this: is there anyone that turned out to be super duper successful that the building might have faulted you on? Have you ever wanted to bring someone in and someone in the building kind of faulted you on it, didn't believe in it?
I think that anytime you go to bring anyone in, people fight you on it, whether it's another executive or it's another artist or whatever. But, I will never forget, we wanted to be in business with Cash Money, and there was a lot of fighting in and around Cash Money, and I wish we'd have had them to be part of that family. For me, as a sales guy at that time, and again, we did lots of other things, but I was classically trained sales guy. That's all I cared about, right? I didn't care about who was, arguing or fighting with who, or what colors people were wearing or rags they were flying. None of that mattered to me. I just cared that it would sell, right? That something would go out there and be impactful, and that we could go and create something exciting. And they always fight with steel, no matter what it is, because no one's going to have the same opinion. So there's always one side versus the other, and sometimes you lose.
So you mean to tell me that Priority Records could have had Cash Money Records over there? And I'm pretty sure No Limit had a problem with that.
There were lots of people that had a problem with it, and frankly, I was a vote, a very minor. Well, I was an insignificant vote that I wanted them there.
Finally get a chance to let the real ones speak. Gangsta Chronicles. What's the word on the streets?